The heart is not simply an emotional center, it is the body's deepest point of contact with awareness itself. Long before the mind forms interpretations, long before the nervous system organizes itself around protection or habit, the heart is already registering reality directly. It is sensing, attuning, resonating. It is responding to life not through cognition but through a quiet, undeniable intelligence that arises from presence. When we speak of the heart as the bridge between form and awareness, we are pointing to this deeper truth. The heart is the first place in the body where separation softens and coherence becomes possible. Somatic coherence is not a technique, nor is it something we manufacture through effort. It is what naturally emerges when the layers of contraction that obscure the heart begin to loosen. In that softening, the body stops defending against life. The breath deepens without instruction. The chest expands without force. And the subtle field around the heart, an energetic atmosphere that extends beyond the physical body, begins to harmonize with the larger field of awareness that holds all things. This coherence is not emotional positivity or calmness, it is the dissolution of inner conflict. It is the moment the body stops arguing with reality. When the heart field opens, experience becomes simpler. Sensations that once felt overwhelming now appear as waves moving through a larger ocean of presence. Emotions lose their sharp edges because they are no longer held inside a contracted identity. Instead of being pushed away or analyzed, they are allowed to arise and dissolve within the vastness of the heart. This is why the heart is so central to the somatic path of awakening. It is where the body stops closing around experience and begins letting life flow freely again. The heart field also has a regulating effect on the rest of the body. It broadcasts safety to the nervous system in a way no thought or affirmation ever could. The parasympathetic system begins to lead. Muscles release because they finally feel they can. The breath becomes unforced, rhythmic, trustworthy. In this coherence, the body remembers its original design, not survival at all costs, but openness as the natural state. What emerges is a deep sense of internal order, a feeling that everything inside you is moving in the same direction, aligned with the same truth. This coherence is not passive. It is a form of power, not the forceful kind that comes from identity, but the effortless kind that comes from connection. When the heart field is open, awareness is no longer experienced as something distant or abstract. It is embodied. It is felt. It moves through the body the way sunlight moves through water. The heart becomes the transmitter, and the body becomes the instrument through which presence expresses itself. To live from this coherence is to move through the world without bracing. It is to sense life not from the contracted vantage point of the ego but from the spaciousness of the heart. Clarity arises without struggle. Compassion arises without effort. Love becomes less an emotion and more a state of being that organizes everything from within. In this way, the heart reveals itself as the bridge, the place where the physical dissolves into the infinite, where the personal becomes permeable to the universal, where form remembers its inseparable relationship to awareness. This is why emotional transparency is inseparable from awakening. Awakening is not the absence of emotion, it is the absence of resistance to emotion. It is the end of the inner struggle against what arises. The heart becomes honest not in a performative way but in an energetic way. It stops pretending to be closed. It stops pretending to be separate. It allows life to move through unfiltered and unprotected, trusting that nothing true can be harmed. In this state, the heart becomes a doorway rather than a barrier. Emotional transparency becomes a form of alignment, a moment-to-moment willingness to remain undefended, receptive, and real. It is not about being positive or spiritual. It is about being present enough to feel life without shrinking away. And through this openness, a profound transformation occurs. The emotional body reorganizes itself around truth rather than fear. What emerges is a deeper coherence, not because the emotions disappear, but because they no longer distort our perception. They no longer define us, bind us, or dictate our behavior. They simply pass through the open space of the heart the way wind moves through an uncaged room. In this fluidity, awakening becomes embodied, not a conceptual understanding but a lived transparency where every emotion reveals more of what we truly are. Emotional transparency is the heart remembering that it has nothing to hide and nothing to protect. It is the beginning of living without inner walls. And in that vulnerability, the bridge between form and awareness becomes unmistakably clear.
Love is not an emotion we manufacture. It is the baseline of a nervous system that is no longer bracing against life. When the body is regulated, when the heart field is coherent, love arises not as an act of will, but as a natural expression of ease. It is what remains when fear drains out of the system, when contraction softens, and when the organism no longer perceives existence as a threat. In this way, love is not something we learn. It is something we uncover by returning the body to its original, unarmored state. A regulated system does not mean a perfectly calm system. It means a system that can meet experience without collapsing into survival patterns. In that resilience, love becomes the default orientation. Not romantic love, not emotional attachment, but the simple, clear openness that recognizes the inherent unity of all experience. Love becomes a physiological spaciousness. It is the felt sense that nothing inside you needs defending and nothing outside you needs controlling. When the heart is regulated, its field expands. This expansion is not metaphorical, it is somatic. The chest softens, the breath releases, the diaphragm stops holding. The subtle energy around the heart stabilizes into coherence. And within this coherence, the body communicates safety to itself. That safety is what we experience as love. Not idealized, not sentimental, but a grounded acceptance that flows effortlessly from presence. This is why love cannot be forced. If the nervous system is dysregulated, the heart cannot stay open. The body contracts, the mind tightens, and love becomes an aspiration rather than a lived reality. But as regulation increases, the heart naturally shifts from defense to connection. It becomes easier to breathe around what once felt overwhelming. It becomes possible to stay present with others without losing yourself. It becomes obvious that love is not something you give. It is something you are when fear is absent. Love, at its core, is the physiological imprint of non-separation. It is what the body feels when the heart is unburdened, when the nervous system is aligned with truth rather than fear. It is the lived signature of unity. And as the system regulates, this love becomes less an experience that comes and goes, and more the underlying atmosphere in which all experience arises. To live from this place is to move through the world with a heart that is not efforting to be open. It simply is. Love becomes the most stable expression of your being. Not because you achieved it, but because your system has returned to its natural coherence. Non-dual insight alone is not enough to stabilize awakening. The mind may recognize unity conceptually, and the nervous system may temporarily soften. But without the heart opening, non-duality remains unstable. The heart is the integrative center where awareness becomes embodied rather than merely understood. When the heart is closed or defended, subtle separation persists. Even if the mind sees that there is no separate self, the body may still contract around identity, protection, or emotional withholding. In this state, awakening fluctuates. Moments of unity are followed by contraction because the emotional body has not yet reorganized around safety. For non-duality to stabilize, the heart must soften its defenses. Emotional transparency, compassion, and vulnerability are not secondary qualities. They are structural requirements for embodied awakening. The heart field regulates the nervous system in a way that allows unity to be lived rather than glimpsed.
As the heart opens, awareness and sensation cease to feel divided. Compassion arises naturally because the illusion of separateness dissolves at a physiological level. The body no longer braces against experience, and perception is no longer filtered through identity-based contraction. In this coherence, unity becomes durable. It is no longer a peak state or altered experience. It becomes the baseline atmosphere of perception. The heart therefore completes what insight begins. It transforms non-duality from a realization into a lived, relational, embodied truth, where form and awareness are experienced as one continuous field. Unity consciousness begins in the heart, but it is completed in the body. The mind can understand oneness philosophically, but the body must feel it. When the heart field expands into coherence, the sense of me and not me dissolves in lived experience. You feel the subtle resonance between your own emotional landscape and the emotional landscape of others. You sense that what moves through you is not separate from what moves through the collective. Compassion arises because the heart perceives through unity rather than through identity. In this state, you no longer relate to others from the surface layer of personality. You sense the innocence beneath their patterns, the fear beneath their defensiveness, the longing beneath their aggression. You intuitively understand that each person is shaped by their nervous system, their history, their held contractions, and that none of these define their essence. This is not passive acceptance, it is powerful presence. Embodied compassion allows you to remain grounded in your own coherence while offering a field of safety that helps others unwind their own contraction. In unity consciousness, your presence becomes medicine. You do not fix, heal, or intervene, you simply stand as an open heart, and in that openness, others feel themselves without judgment or threat. As compassion becomes embodied, life begins to feel less like a set of individual experiences and more like a continuous flow of shared existence. The recognition of unity does not remove the uniqueness of form, it reveals the seamless field that expresses itself through every form. You move through the world with a heart that is not only open but attuned, sensitive, grounded, and capable of meeting each moment with clarity and warmth. Embodied compassion and unity consciousness are the final movements of the heart's awakening. They reflect a system that has released the illusion of separateness and now lives from the deeper truth of interconnectedness. To embody compassion is to live as the heart field itself, spacious, coherent, and free, where awareness takes form not as a separate self but as the living presence of love, meeting itself in all things. The journey of awakening always brings us back to the heart, not as a poetic metaphor, but as the precise somatic doorway through which separation dissolves. The mind can glimpse truth, the nervous system can release its grip, and the body can unwind old patterns, but it is the heart that ultimately integrates awakening into lived experience. The heart is where formless awareness touches form, where presence meets sensation, and where the vastness of consciousness reveals itself as the substance of every moment. When the heart opens, life stops being something we navigate and becomes something we allow. The armoring that once enclosed identity softens. The stories that shaped our emotional world lose their authority. And the tension that kept us separate from the fullness of our own being releases into a deeper coherence. In this openness, the body is no longer a container for fear but a vessel for presence, a way for awareness to express itself with clarity, compassion, and truth. The heart is both the bridge and the destination, the living threshold where form remembers awareness, and awareness remembers itself through form. In returning to the heart, we return to the deepest truth. We were never separate, only temporarily closed. The heart is the home where awakening becomes whole.